Enrique Iglesias was 8 years old the first time he realized his father was gone. Not dead, not missing, just gone. Out there somewhere, on a stage in Japan or Argentina or Germany, singing to strangers, while his son learned to ride a bicycle without him. Again. Madrid, 1983. The Iglesias mansion, in the exclusive Puerta de Hierro neighborhood, had everything a child could want. Tennis courts, a swimming pool, servants, the finest toys money could buy. Everything except the one thing Enrique wanted most, his father's attention. Julio Iglesias was at the peak of his powers. To all the girls I've loved before had just conquered America. He was touring 300 days a year, selling out stadiums from Madrid to Manila. The world's most famous Latin singer, the romantic voice that made millions of women swoon. But at home, to his 3 children from his first marriage, Chabeli, Julio Jr., and Enrique, he was just the man in the photographs, the voice on the occasional phone call, the signature on birthday cards that arrived late, if at all. "I remember waiting by the door," Enrique would say decades later, his voice still carrying the echo of that 8-year-old boy. "My mother would say, 'Your father's coming home today.' I'd wait there for hours. Sometimes he'd show up at midnight. Sometimes he wouldn't come at all." The divorce had been brutal. When Julio and Isabel Preisler separated in 1979, Spain watched their golden couple shatter across every tabloid. Isabel got the children. Julio got the world. It seemed like a fair trade to everyone, except the children who were part of the deal. Isabel did her best. She was Grace under pressure, raising 3 children alone, while her ex-husband's face stared at her from magazine covers everywhere she turned. She never spoke badly of Julio to the children. She never had to. His absence spoke loud enough. But Enrique was different from his siblings. Chabeli adapted, found her own path in journalism and entertainment. Julio Jr. struggled, but eventually found his footing. But Enrique internalized everything. The abandonment, the loneliness, the feeling of being the son of the world's most romantic man who somehow couldn't find romance in fatherhood. And somewhere in that loneliness, music found him. He was 12 when he started writing songs. Not because his father did it, because his father didn't. Because when you're alone in a mansion at midnight and your father is on a stage 8,000 miles away, you find ways to fill the silence. Guitar became companion. Melody became therapy. Lyrics became the conversation he couldn't have with the man who was supposed to teach him how to be a man. His mother noticed. Isabel, who'd lived through the music industry's seduction of her ex-husband, who'd watched 3 children grow up in the shadow of their father's spotlight, had one simple reaction: no. She didn't want me anywhere near the music industry, Enrique later recalled. She'd seen what it did to my father, what it did to us. She wanted me to be a lawyer, a businessman, anything but a singer. But mothers can't police teenage rebellion when it's fueled by legitimate talent. 1994, Miami. Enrique was 19, attending the University of Miami, supposedly studying business. In reality, he was sneaking into local studios, recording demos, pouring his abandonment and longing into songs with English lyrics because he didn't want to compete in his father's Spanish-language domain. He recorded his demos under the name Enrique Martinez, using his mother's maiden name. Not because he was ashamed of being an Iglesias, because he knew what would happen if people found out. Every door would open. Every opportunity would be handed to him, and he'd never know if it was because of his talent or his name. "I wanted to earn it," he said. I needed to know I could do this on my own, that I wasn't just Julio Iglesias' son. The demos were good, raw, emotional, different from his father's romantic balladry. There was pain in Enrique's voice that Julio's polished perfection never showed. There was anger, longing, vulnerability. It was the sound of a kid who'd grown up rich, but emotionally bankrupt, who'd had everything except what mattered. Record labels heard the demos. They didn't know who he was, just that the voice was special. By the time they found out he was Julio Iglesias' son, they'd already made their decision. They wanted him. And then came the conversation Enrique had been dreading. Julio found out. Of course he found out. When you're Julio Iglesias, you have people who tell you things. When your 19-year-old son is shopping demos to record labels in Miami, someone mentions it. The call came late at night. Julio, somewhere on tour in Europe, had blocked out an hour between shows to call his son. Not to congratulate him. To stop him. "This business will destroy you," Julio said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who knew. "I've lived this life. I know what it costs. I don't want this for you." What he meant, I've sacrificed everything. My marriage, my relationship with my children, years of my life for this career. I don't want you to make the same mistakes. What Enrique heard, "You don't think I'm good enough. You don't believe in me. You never believed in me because you were never here." "I'm doing it anyway," Enrique said. "Then you're a fool," Julio replied. They didn't speak for 6 months after that call. 1995. Enrique Iglesias was released. His debut album sung entirely in Spanish despite his earlier plans, despite trying to escape his father's shadow. Because somewhere in the recording process, he realized he couldn't run from who he was. He was Julio Iglesias' son, but he was also his own person. The album would prove which one mattered more. The album sold 6 million copies worldwide. The single, Si Tu Te Vas, became a massive hit across Latin America. Suddenly, Enrique Iglesias wasn't just Julio's son. He was Enrique Iglesias, legitimate artist in his own right. And Julio? He said nothing publicly. No congratulations, no acknowledgement, just silence. But privately, something was happening. Julio listened to the album, all of it, multiple times. And in his son's voice, he heard something he'd never expected. Himself. Not in technique or style, but in the raw need to communicate through music. The way Enrique poured emotion into every line. The way he connected with audiences, not through perfection, but through vulnerability. It was what Julio had once been, before the machine of fame polished all the rough edges away. At a family gathering in 1996, one of the rare occasions when Julio was actually present, father and son found themselves alone on a terrace. Awkward silence. 2 men who looked alike, but barely knew each other. "Your album is good," Julio finally said. Not "I'm proud." Not "I was wrong." Just "Your album is good." "Thank you," Enrique said, waiting for the but. "You have something I lost," Julio continued. "You still sound like you mean it." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a reconciliation. But it was something. An acknowledgement. A crack in the wall. The 2000s became a strange dance. Enrique exploded into the English language market with Bailamos, 1999, and Hero, 2001. He sold over 180 million records worldwide, won Grammys, became a global superstar. In many ways, he surpassed his father's success in the American market, achieving what Julio had fought so hard for, but in a fraction of the time. The media, predictably, tried to create a rivalry. Father versus son. Battle of the Iglesias. Who's the better singer? Both men hated it. because it missed the point entirely. This was never about music. This was about a son who needed a father and got a superstar instead. This was about a father who'd given the world everything and his children nothing. This was about two men trying to find their way back to each other through the only language they both spoke fluently, music. 2008. A benefit concert in Miami. For the first time, Julio and Enrique performed together on stage. Not a planned collaboration. Enrique was the main act. Julio showed up unannounced, walked on stage during Enrique's performance, and they sang together. The audience went wild. The media called it a historic moment. The reconciliation everyone had been waiting for. But backstage, the moment was quieter, more human. "You did it," Julio said, hand on his son's shoulder. "You did what I couldn't. You stayed yourself." Enrique, for once, didn't have a response ready, because in that moment, he heard what he'd been waiting his whole life to hear. Approval. Recognition. Love, in the only way his father knew how to express it. The truth is, their relationship remained complicated. You don't undo decades of absence with a single performance. Enrique still gave interviews where the pain of those childhood years was visible. Julio still struggled to be present, still disappeared into tours and recordings, still chose work over family more often than he should. But they found a rhythm. Difficult calls on birthdays, awkward family dinners, occasional collaborations. It wasn't the father-son relationship either of them had wanted, but it was the one they had. And slowly, painfully, they learned to work with that. Enrique had his own children now, 3 of them with Anna Kournikova. And watching him with them, present, involved, there, you could see him making different choices, breaking the cycle, being the father his father couldn't be. "I learned from him," Enrique said in a 2019 interview. "I learned what to do and what not to do. That's something, right? That's worth something." And Julio, now in his 70s, looking back on a life of unparalleled success and profound regret, finally said what he should have said decades ago. "I failed them. My first 3 children. I was there for my career, and I wasn't there for them. Enrique didn't need my name to succeed. He needed his father. And I gave him neither. It was too late to change the past. Too late to be there for the bicycle rides, and the school plays, and the moments that mattered. But maybe, in acknowledging it, in finally naming the wound, there was a chance to heal it. Not completely. Never completely. But enough. 2 men. 2 superstars. 1 last name. Both spent decades proving they were more than just that name. Julio proved he was more than his father's expectations. Enrique proved he was more than his father's shadow. And in the end, perhaps that was the real legacy of the Iglesias name. Not the millions of records sold or the stadiums filled, but 2 men who found their own voices in a world that only wanted to hear their fathers. The father who lost his son twice, once to absence, once to ambition, and the son who had to lose his father to find himself. That's the real music. That's the real song. And it's one neither of them could have written alone. End of parenthesis.